Greetings. I am Dr. Ted Barnett, founder and president of Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute. I'm so excited to have everybody here for the November Lifestyle as Medicine lecture with our amazing guest lecturer, Jill Nussinow, who will be speaking to us about herbs and spices and how they are beyond trendy and perfect for holiday meals. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the programs that we run. First of all, we are a nonprofit. We are very dependent on our donors. My wife and I are full-time volunteers, but we do pay our staff. And one of our flagship programs is the 15-day whole food plant-based jumpstart, which we developed right here on our stage here. And it is one of the few programs that is certified by the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. We also run the LIFT project, which is also certified by the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And we have our own health coaching program for both groups and individuals. So if you're interested in that, take a look at rochesterlifestylemedicine.org. We also run the Pale Blue Dot community, and if you are here tonight, you had to interact with that incredible platform that we have had the privilege of developing. So it's not just for running lectures like this, but we also have our learning management system on there. So when we run our 15-day whole food plant-based jumpstart, that is all included on the the Pale Blue Dot, which we consider to be at the interface of human and planetary health. If you'd like to if you'd like to give it a try, there's a 30-day free trial, and after that, it's $5 per month. Unlike Facebook or any other social media platform, we do not have any advertising. We're not selling your eyeballs, which is why we do charge a nominal fee. Our guest tonight is Jill Nussinow. She's been a registered dietitian for more than 30 years, teaching a plant-based diet, including 20 years as an instructor at the McDougall program. She's the author of 4 award-winning cookbooks, has won multiple cooking contests, and can be found in a number of DVDs. She is well known for her most recent cookbook, Vegan Under Pressure, which has taught thousands of people how to use their Instant Pot. She is a forager of mushrooms, sea vegetables, nettles, and wild weeds, as well as other true natural foods. Jill regularly teaches at Rancho La Puerta Resort and Spa in Tecate, Mexico. Jill teaches Zoom breathe awareness classes twice weekly, helping people calm their anxiety, settle their nervous system, lower blood pressure and blood sugar, and achieve a better state of health. She also occasionally teaches sprouting, fermentation, and actual cooking via Zoom. Her website is thevegiequeen.com. And now, without further ado, if Jill could please turn on her video, and I will stop sharing. There she is. Hello, Jill. It's good to see you. Welcome
Hey,
aboard.
thank you for having me. This is great.
Absolutely.
I'm so excited.
Yeah. Well, we are too.
This talk came from a couple of other talks, and I've done them for people who are just regular people like all of you. I've done them for dietitians. I've done them for mixed audiences. And my idea is that herbs and spices have become really trendy, and people only think of them in a certain way. And I want to mention the holiday meals because it's coming up. So I hope you'll have plenty of questions. I'm not going to cover everything, but herbs and spices are not just trendy, just we know a whole lot more about them. I have affiliate relationships with Burlap and Barrel Spice Company and Mountain Rose Herbs. I have no other disclosures for you. And I know generally in a talk like this, I don't have to give you any disclosures, but I just want you to know. And here is what I will tell you about any affiliate relationships I have. I would not ever recommend anything that I have not used, tried, and loved myself. And so I think that is important. I make so little money that I couldn't even make a trip to Rochester with what I make. So anyway, not that there's anything wrong with Rochester. It's just a long way from where I live on the California coast. So I'm going to talk about what an herb is, what a spice is, a little bit about history, why they're trending, and how to use them for flavor and nutrition. And I'm also going to bring in the holidays, because if we want to think about it or not, I think in a couple of weeks in the US, we are going to have Thanksgiving. And then shortly thereafter, it's going to be Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year's. We want to keep all that in mind. So historically, spices and herbs were used for a very interesting reason, basically because there was no refrigeration. And so herbs and spices are what kept food from turning rancid or rancid less quickly, covered up maybe some, questionable smells, tastes, and they were available kind of because they had to travel a long way generally. The other part is, so historically, they've been used for thousands of years when people found them. And then culturally, we have a lot of cultures that use herbs and spices. And I'd have to say, kind of sadly, that in America, we aren't culturally attuned to herbs and spices unless we have some kind of ethnicity in our background. Which I found out. I was interviewing a chef at Google, a vegan chef, many years ago, and I asked her what her favorite spices and herbs were. And she grew up in Ohio, and I don't think this was just from Ohio, but she said to me, well, my mom used salt and pepper, and that was about it. And I thought, no onions, no garlic, no. And she said that was the only thing. She may have been exposed to cinnamon. Of course, in her training, she learned to use a lot of different herbs and spices. But if you haven't culturally grown up with a variety of spices and herbs, you may not use them. And in another story, which is kind of the opposite, I taught a group of Hispanic women who worked at the WIC office about herbs and spices in a cooking demonstration I did. And what they kept asking me was, where's the salt? So they were very salt oriented. They were not fazed by any of the herbs and spices I used, but herbs and spices are a way to cut down on salt, which I think I'm going to mention, and I just mentioned it. The other thing about herbs and spices, and the reason they really moved from place to place, was they were easy to transport during migration or immigration. So you've heard of the Spice Road, the Silk Road, so herbs and spices traveled easily, very easily. And so it went from one place to another. And when people traveled, and when I first learned about the explorers, which I think I learned in sixth grade, I did not understand why they were traveling halfway around the world to discover something. It really turned out that the reason they were traveling was for the herbs and spices, not for pretty much any other reason. They did not need to explore anything else, but they wanted to bring their ships back filled with herbs and spices to be used in whatever country they came from, which is kind of interesting. And I'll talk about the difference between herbs and spices, and you'll see it was mostly the spices that they found in the Far East. So some of the most popular herbs and spices are black pepper, capsicum, which is chilies, cumin, cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, turmeric, saffron. I'm just going to roll these out: coriander, cloves, dill, mint, thyme, sesame seeds, mustard seeds, and curry powder, which these are the most popular ones worldwide. The interesting thing is some of them have really been studied, and that would be oregano, peppermint, thyme, lemon balm, allspice, cinnamon, and they all contain really high concentrations of antioxidants. And in a normal intake, whatever that may be, I don't know exactly, say maybe a half a teaspoon a day of various things, may contribute significantly to your total intake of plant antioxidants and be an even better source of dietary antioxidants than many other foods, the ones we think of as high in antioxidants, like fruits, berries, grains, and vegetables. And the reason is they are very concentrated generally. So I'm just going to tell you this. It's not in any of my slides, but if you have something that is fresh and you dry it, it dries down to about 10 times less than what you started with. Although something that you may want to take a note of is if you use a fresh herb, you will want to use a tablespoon. If you want to use a dried herb, you will use a teaspoon. So that's about 1 to 3. And so it's not the 10, but these are very concentrated sources of both flavor and antioxidants. So I think that's really important. And the reason that I encourage people to use herbs and spices An herb is the non-woody parts of plants. So when we think of an herb, we may think of basil, sage, tarragon, thyme, lemon balm, mint. So these are the leaves of plants. Then it gets more interesting. Spices can come from the following plant parts: roots, rhizomes, stems. They can come from leaves, bark, flowers, fruits, and seeds. The interesting thing about this is, does it matter whether we call something an herb or we call it a spice? And the answer is no, because what happens with the American Spice Trade Association, they define spice as any dried plant product used primarily for seasoning purposes, and they include pepper, cinnamon, cloves, leafy herbs, which are in the temperate zone: oregano, basil, sage, spices, seeds like sesame, mustard, caraway, and dehydrated vegetables used as spices: onion, garlic, chili peppers. If you were to herbalist, you would only put the plant leaves as the herbs, and you would say the spices are the dried ones, such as pepper, cinnamon, cloves, and those type of things. Does it matter? Absolutely not. The key with eating plant-based foods is to make sure that you have lots of flavor, because the flavor also adds nutrition. And I told you people used herbs and spices for their flavor. They weren't thinking nutrition at the time, and turmeric was used, and it is still the most popular spice used in India, and is very antioxidant, but it was used for other reasons. So not because people, and it's maybe the same reasons, like people did want their food to taste good, and maybe it didn't taste good if it had been sitting around for a really long period of time. So that's like the traditional use. Now, if you think about your winter holiday meals, I want you to think for a second. Maybe close your eyes, maybe take a nice, full, deep belly breath, and just sit with what comes up for you, other than maybe a very full tummy, which you might have from that breath, but you may also have it from thinking about what you're thinking about, which might be, often it's a scent. There's an aroma, and you're like, oh, what is that? And often many of us think of the scent of a holiday winter meal. It could be the sage in the stuffing. Maybe it's the other herbs in the stuffing. Maybe it's the cinnamon and cloves and whatever we use in our pumpkin spice blend. Or maybe it's just the smell of pumpkin pie, which we don't always smell that pumpkin, but we do have that aroma of the cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, ginger, whatever else you might add to it. And they say that the number one thing that we remember in our memory of the senses is smell. And it's interesting, I make stock quite often, and I usually have bay leaves in there and thyme and some other herbs. And my husband always says to me, what is that? It smells like stuffing. And it's nowhere near stuffing, but it's what he smells. And he has a very acute sense of smell, which is good and not so good, because there are some scents that he does not like. But I think that we often associate the holidays with some savory smells, some sweet smells. Some of them are sweet and savory. And think about what it is that you might be smelling. So I was taking a yoga class the other day. It was very interesting because the yoga teacher said something about this time of year. And where we live, we don't have a Starbucks. So I thought it was fascinating that he mentioned this. And he said, well, we're going from pumpkin spice lattes to peppermint mochas. And I thought, wow, that really sums up how we think about spices. And I do know that people get really excited about the pumpkin spice flavors when it comes to, early November, mid-October. People are like, oh, the pumpkin spice lattes are back, or whatever it is. I want to encourage you to think about using these spices all year long. And peppermint mocha is not my favorite. Peppermint is not my favorite, but it is rich nutritionally and almost medicinally. It's so good for you, all of the mints. Now, you can't always tell what's in something by looking at it. And this photo is one of my non-award winning photos of an actual dish that I make for the holidays. I have it on my website. It's wild rice stuffed into delicata squash, which is one of my favorite squash. And in this dish, I use so many of those spices. I use cardamom and nutmeg and cinnamon. And the one that is highly medicinal, but not one of my favorites, is cloves. So I use very little of that in this. And it may be because clove is known for helping with teeth pain and clove oil. And I don't know, there's something about the scent of clove that doesn't attract me. And I do use it in my pumpkin spice blend, but very little because I don't really care for it. But when you're making a dish like this or any other plant-based dish, it may not taste like that much, but if you add all these amazing spices, things that really pump up the flavor, then people are like, wow, what is this? And I am a huge cinnamon fan, huge. So when my husband gets his steel cut oats in the morning, he gets a lot of cinnamon on them. And I'm going to talk more about cinnamon, but I think it's something that's very accessible to most people. And so I highly encourage you to think about herbs and spices you don't always use, but you might use more of. And your nose can let you know what you like and what you don't like, but that doesn't mean don't use the things you don't like. Maybe just use a little less of them. Be judicious. So we use spices to add flavor and sometimes color. So chili is not known for its holiday dishiness, but it is one of the things that really, I think, brings about how to use herbs and spices for a very good use. Now, I make I was going to say I make a pumpkin chili. I actually make a sweet potato chili, and I often make it for Halloween because people are looking for black and orange. And I use a chili spice sometimes, but what you want to know about a chili spice is it is often a conglomeration of spices, not just one spice. So if you're going to make chili and you want to put in chili powder, make sure your chili powder is just chili powder. And then you can add the other spices with it, such as cumin, maybe some, I'm trying to think what else I put in my chili, but cumin for sure. You might add an herb such as oregano. I add a tomato powder, but chili spice often has salt in it. So look at what's in the blend that you're using. And often a chili, now all chilies are different, and you want to make sure the heat of your chili, because I have bought chili powder that is so hot that I've had to add more beans to my chili, and chili powder, which is so mild that I have to add something hot to it. But they're called capsicums, chili peppers. And when you use paprika, paprika is a sweet capsicum, and paprika has a lot of nutritional value. People often just think of it like sprinkled on the top of food, but I add that to my chili too, because it really adds a really lovely flavor. Hungarian cuisine is really based on paprika, whether it be hot or sweet. And so there are a lot of cuisines where we use different herbs and spices for different things, but you can make your chili red only from using chilies, whether they be sweet or hot. Now you can buy blends or you can make them you can make your own, and I highly encourage that. In my book, Vegan Under Pressure, one of the things that I loved was they let me put in blend recipes because they're really easy to make at home. And I don't use salt in my cooking very much or very little. So I like to make my own spice blend. So the joy of that is you can make it as hot or sweet as you like. Now, what is curry powder? Curry powder is a blend of spices. It is not one thing. And from what I understand, in various households in India, they have their own curry blend according to maybe what people like, maybe what they like to put as the top note. Some of them have a lot of clove as the top note. Some of them are turmeric as the top note. So curry powder that we buy in the US is still a blend of spices. If you make your own, you can make it very much to your liking. So the most commonly used spice in the US is black pepper. And I often wonder which are the most underused spices and why they are so underused. And how do we get ourselves to use more herbs and spices? And I think it's education and promoting recipes that use them and how to have increased flavor. And one of the things that I really encourage you to do is if you have it available, go to a store that sells herbs and spices in bulk, because you don't have to commit to a whole jar that might cost you, I don't know, these days, $6, $7, $8, and then go, oh, I don't like that. But if you can just get a little bit and put it either in a jar that you bring to whatever store you go to, they do this at co-ops, and I have a store near me that does that. You can just try it. And I always actually love buying herbs and spices in bulk because I can buy 8 or 10 cinnamon sticks for $1 or less. And these are organic spices. So it's just really heartwarming to me to be able to buy anything for less than $1, because even at the dollar store, things aren't $1. And so just think about that and why you don't use more herbs and spices. My best guess is you don't use them because you don't have them, you don't make them accessible, and you're like, how do I use it? And I encourage people to use herbs and spices any way you like, but really think about how, what is that flavor? How does it go with people? Like, I don't know, which ones do I put together? And don't you maybe start with one. And most people, when you think of an herb, most people are like, pesto. I'm like, great, you've tasted basil and you know what it is, you know you can put it in your Italian food. Just think about how you use different herbs and spices. Now, how much do we use? They say that per capita consumption in 1966 was 1.2 pounds annually, and now it has more than tripled to 3.7 pounds. And I'm going to say in 2024, it's probably even more. And I keep wondering, is this related to people wanting less salt or sodium? Is it because you have used less fat in your food? Is it because we're all getting older day by day? I don't know the reason, but I am so happy to see this because it's still a small amount, 3.7 pounds. Well, I didn't do the math, but that's 48 and another, I don't know, 12. So that's 56 ounces. That's not even, that's just over an ounce a week. That's pretty good, but we could probably increase it. In the slide, I just want to mention there are some things on there that you may not usually use, but there's a lot of peppercorns, there's paprika. One of them that is my favorite actually is, I don't know if it's in this slide. Oh, it's there. It's ground, is sumac. I absolutely adore sumac. And I will say Burlap and Barrel has some amazing cured sumac. You can also get it at your favorite Middle Eastern store for a lot less. You can grind your own berries. It has a lemony flavor and it's used a lot in Middle Eastern cooking. It is so good. And I keep that one out to use most of the time for many different things. And down at the bottom, there are mustard seeds. And if you don't know, you can make your own mustard from mustard seeds. And they are kind of spicy and they're used usually in curry blends or Other things, they come in yellow and black. So this is interesting. And I mentioned sumac. Do you use the spices whole or do you use them ground? Now, I highly recommend that you buy, when possible, whole spices and grind them as you need them. If you use flax, and I'm guessing that a lot of you do, you know that it will stay more intact, meaning it won't go bad, it won't get rancid if you leave it whole. Once it's ground, the essential oils, which is the part of the spices that is the really, really good for us part, they start to dissipate. One of them that I really like is cardamom. I showed in a previous slide, I think. And if you take the little seeds out and grind them, it's so flavorful and amazing. And once they're ground, they don't last that long. Their aroma dissipates. And I will tell you, when the aroma dissipates, it usually means they've oxidized, and we want them to be antioxidants and to use them to help our health and nutrition. So you want your spices to remain good. Now, I will tell you, this is a true story. I met a chef and he told me that he told me this recipe and he said, you need to grind your nutmeg. And I was like, grind my nutmeg? And I was like, I don't even like nutmeg. And then I thought about it. Well, I had used my mother's nutmeg for a recipe, and I am positive at this point that my late mother had this nutmeg for probably 10, 15, 20 years, never used it. I never remember nutmeg. And when I opened it to use it, I was like, it smells like dust. Well, in essence, it was dust. So I went out to the cooking store. I got myself a nutmeg grinder and nutmeg. And I will tell you, you can use your microplane grater if you like. You don't have to get a special nutmeg grater or grinder. And I put this on the recipe and I was like, oh, nutmeg. I love nutmeg. So certain things that are bigger, like nutmeg, you can grind them on your microplane. If you want to grind more of them, and nutmeg will not do this, if you have smaller spices, put them in your spice grinder, which some people call a coffee grinder. Mine is specifically used for spices. Now, if you want to grind cardamom seed in your coffee grinder, you'll have something that will be like Moroccan coffee because they add cardamom to their coffee. But if you don't want cardamom in your coffee, have a special grinder that you use only for that. There are spice grinders, which are usually more expensive, but your inexpensive coffee grinder will grind your spices. Then what you want to do once they're ground is put them in a jar, and then you can label them. If you like, you can toast them. Like, I love toasted cumin. I think it is so amazing. When the aroma comes off of that, I mean, I could just stand there with my head over my pan. Now, if you toast, I want to encourage you to not do anything else. Do not put your spices in the oven and walk away. I like to do it in a pan where I am standing there watching them. I can easily get distracted by 100 other things and I will forget, and then I'll be like, what's burning? How much you toast them depends on how you like them. So you can toast them really dark or you can toast them less dark. I often will toast some, grind them, put them in a jar, and then have them. You do not have to toast your spices if you don't want. And the same goes for seeds like sesame. You can toast them if you like. How much you toast them is you don't want them to burn. So once you see them like white or beige sesame turning brown, get them out of the pan because the oils will continue to cook. And how to store them? Usually out of the light, out of the humidity, not above your stove that you open often. And how long? This is the good question. Some things that are whole, you can have for a long time and they'll be good. If they're ground, I would say most herbs and spices are going to last maybe 6 months, maybe more. The things that I use the most of are used up before that time. But if you have anything, and this is where the labeling and dating comes in, if you have anything that's older, you do not want to use it. You want to smell it first. If it smells like dust, it's dust. Get yourself some new ones, especially if you have somewhere you can buy them in bulk. So does dosage, in quotes, matter? Can what you use in everyday cooking make a nutritional or health outcome difference? And it really depends. The answer probably is yes. Now, cinnamon, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more in detail, really can help. Cloves may help. Various herbs and spices may help you in your life. And so, yes, you want to use more of them, but there are some like cloves, it has eugenol in it, and it may interact with various medications. So you just want to be careful and you don't want to use too much. It can be toxic. Most of the others are not toxic. So this is a slide people tend to love because we all think of certain antioxidants. So this is the ORAC scores for these various herbs. A half a teaspoon of oregano leaves has more antioxidants than 3 cups of spinach. A teaspoon of curry powder has more antioxidants than a half a cup of red grapes. And many people say, oh, I just drink my red wine. Well, the grapes actually have more resveratrol than the wine, and the curry powder obviously has more than the grapes. And then the cinnamon, a teaspoon of cinnamon has more antioxidants than a half a cup of blueberries. So these are the things we think of when we think of antioxidants, but the herbs and spices actually have more. So I encourage you to use the herbs and spices. Don't forget about those other things. Nothing wrong with blueberries. You know, I love blueberries. They're right there at the top of my favorite fruits. But the herbs and spices actually can provide more. And I don't know if you've ever made like an Indian type curry, and I'm American, I'm not appropriating, but when I make a curry, like last night I made chickpea curry, I use quite a bit of curry powder. I also add extra turmeric, ginger, garlic, you know, and things that I know are going to be good for me, but you're getting a whole lot in a really delicious dish. So turmeric. So people are like, well, I don't want to do turmeric. I want to have the curcumin, and it's the spice of the 2000s. And also it's been used in the ancient times. It's still the most used spice in India. So it is highly anti-inflammatory. And when I say the 2000s, I'm talking like starting from 2000, so the last almost 25 years. Now, some people can't eat it or use it in food. So curcumin, and I'm a really big proponent of using food as food and not being like, oh, I need the curcumin. And a lot of people, well, I need to, and I have a friend, she has arthritis. She's like, I can't eat the turmeric. So if you can't eat turmeric for whatever reason, then maybe you want to get a supplement that is curcumin. Now, when paired with piperine, which is in black pepper, and other spices that are in curry blends, it can help promote the absorption of turmeric. The thing that's so interesting about turmeric is it's not very well absorbed, but it can help with cancer, cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, arthritis, neurological diseases, and Crohn's disease. These are all documented in studies, and it's so interesting to think that it actually has a somewhat nutritional / medicinal effect. If you're not, now I'm really big on flavor, and I'm really big on, I want my food to taste how I want my food to taste. So I'm not well, and my husband, he's a particular eater. He doesn't want turmeric in his smoothie. He doesn't want turmeric sprinkled on his food. I really like to use the herbs and spices in the foods where it seems to make the most sense. But if you want to get turmeric, here's an interesting thing I've done. I make savory steel cut oats, and I add turmeric to my savory steel cut oats, which have sweet potato in them and greens and other things. Turmeric in steel cut oats is really yummy, and I highly recommend you try it. If you haven't tried it, it may be a way that you're going to eat your oats and your turmeric. So just remember the food as the food. If you can get fresh turmeric, use it. Just know it stains everything. So be careful with it. But when I can get it fresh for less than $20 a pound, I usually buy some, but buy good quality turmeric, whatever that means, really fresh. So this has come up lately. The safety of herbs and spices. On March 6th, the FDA issued a recall of certain brands of cinnamon, one of the most loved and used spices, due to lead contamination. In October 2023, there was a recall of many spice blends containing oregano as rodent feces were discovered. Oregano, just to let you know, is fairly easy to grow if you live in a place where it freezes. Bring your little plant in for the winter and take good care of it. I love fresh oregano, but there are also, this is getting so out of hand, and I don't really know exactly what it is, but find a brand that has been tested. Turmeric, chili powder, and cumin may contain high levels of heavy metals like lead, cadmium, and arsenic due to soil pollution, production methods, the use of contaminated water for irrigation. So buy your herbs and spices from trusted sources that are doing the tests for heavy metals. And it's a good reason to use herbs and spices in moderation. You know, I was just reading something about cloves and having too much. You'll never find me doing that, but you know, you don't want to be using a quarter cup of any herb or spice, maybe a tablespoon at most. My husband gets about a total of a teaspoon of cinnamon on his steel cut oats, and that seems like plenty. So here's the cinnamon. Not all cinnamon is the same. So the Cinnamomum verum, which is also known as Ceylon cinnamon, is the one that you want to use. It's lighter, sweeter flavor. It's the one that's more common in Europe and North America, but people have switched to the flavor of the cassia cinnamon, which is the Vietnamese cinnamon. The Ceylon cinnamon really controls blood glucose, your blood sugar levels, and there are potential liver issues with cassia or Vietnamese cinnamon. And I would say I would probably not recommend using more than a half a teaspoon of the Vietnamese cinnamon, sometimes called royal cinnamon. It smells so good. You just want to eat it all. So when I make my husband's steel cut oats, I put, well, maybe not quite half, like maybe a third of the cassia, Vietnamese cinnamon, and 2/3 the cinnamon verum, which is what you want to look at. Now, often it may not say what kind of cinnamon you have, so just don't use too much of it. Other good for your heart spices, probably all of them. Oh, this is the cardamom. The cardamom is a funny thing because those are the green pods. You get black pods. Here's what I truly believe. Spices and herbs have been used for thousands of years. Do we need a study to know that these are really good for you? I don't think so. So cardamom, coriander, tulsi, ginger, and the ginger and the tulsi have been well studied, but if they're not studied, it doesn't mean don't use them. Maybe use them in different ways. It's just know that there's benefit to using any herb and spice in moderation for your health. I really, that peppermint mocha made me really think, and I have this slide anyway, about the mint family. And so there's many types of mint. Tulsi is in the mint family, and it's traditionally used in Ayurvedic medicine and used as a tea most often. I have not had luck growing it. My sister in New York has had luck growing it. I love Tulsi tea. There's at least 3 different types, and it is very calming to your nervous system, so I highly recommend you use it. You could mix it with mint, which is very good for your digestion, and find the mint you like. They are not all the same. And then they have done a randomized controlled trial on spearmint for women who have PCOS. So if you are not one of those women, don't worry about it, but use your tulsi and your mint because they can be beneficial. Ginger is one of the most studied spices, roots, whatever you want to call it. There's more than 100 compounds in the plant. And I will tell you, I live up a very crazy, windy road, and it is effective for motion sickness. I make ginger capsules. You can buy these. You can suck on ginger candy. I also buy the non-candied, the non-crystallized candied ginger, which is really, really good. Pregnant women can use it for morning sickness, but you should talk about it with your doctor. It's good for nausea and vomiting, inflammation, digestive function, colorectal cancer markers. It tastes great in your pumpkin pie or your crumble or anything you want to put it in. My husband's not a big ginger fan, but often he doesn't know that I use it. And you can use it fresh or dried. If you use it fresh, I have a couple of tips. You can either take it and freeze it. You can grate it first and freeze it in little ice cube trays. Or what you can do is you can put it in a jar of dry sherry and use it that way. It lasts a really long time, so in the refrigerator. So I highly recommend ginger. I use it often. So which are the ones to focus on? Black pepper, the capsicum, cumin, cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, turmeric, all of these, dill, mint, thyme, and don't forget sage because it's the one that we think of for the holidays. And don't forget the wider world of spices and spice blends. And here's an interesting thing. Even Mrs. Dash might be beneficial to add to your cooking. I'm not a huge Mrs. Dash fan, but if you like it, use it. I know Mrs. Dash has come up with all kinds of blends. So whatever you use to pump up your cooking, know that you're getting nutrition as well as great flavor. So the best ways to buy what you will use. Buy in bulk to save money. Buy from a place with good turnover, order online. And when I say when to buy in a jar, maybe if you need a jar. So I save my empty spice jars and I bring them to my bulk place and I fill them. I often bring the same jar. I can tell you the place that I have shopped the most. Number 408 is curry powder. I've been buying it for more than 30 years. Sadly, though, this is fascinating. They changed the blend of curry powder. So the first time I bought it and it was not the same one, I could tell right away. So that's why I like to make my own. So I know it's what I like. I already went over that. Where to buy herbs and spices, organic or not. I give you some ideas. So Mountain Rose Herbs has organic, Whole Spice has organic and not organic. Burlap and Barrel doesn't have all organic, but they really curate their spices. They know where they get them. Frontier, Rumi has, saffron. I didn't mention saffron. Saffron is amazing spice. It is kind of expensive, but don't worry about using it. You can use it. And where your herbs and spices grow matters. So turmeric or any herb or spice from one place is not the same as it is from other places. So turmeric from Belize is not the same as turmeric from India. So just keep that in mind and you may find the one that you like best. So I wanted to leave a little time for questions. I thank you for your attention, for showing up, for being here. And I hope you have a lot of good questions because I don't know.
Yeah,
So,
thank you so much. Actually, before we get to the Q&A, I'm just gonna, if you could stop sharing, Jill, I'm gonna start sharing.
I can.
I'm gonna just share for just a second. And then we're gonna have Dr. Friedman come on and we're gonna go through our Q&A. We do have some upcoming programs. We run the 15-day whole food plant-based jumpstart every month. We've had over 2,500 people go through the program. Almost 400 physicians from around the country have referred at least one patient, and we do work closely with physicians, but you can also sign up on your own. About 2/3 of people go through it, sign up on their own, but about a third are referred by their doctors. We also have the Lift Project and health coaching. And again, there's more information at rochesterlifestylemedicine.org. We do not charge for these programs, but we are a nonprofit and we would definitely appreciate your donations. So if Bob could put the link for donation in the chat, or you could aim your phone at that QR code. I'm going to give you 2 more seconds, but you'll be able to click on the chat. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I'd just like to introduce Dr. Susan Friedman, who is our Director of Clinical Studies and a Professor of Medicine at the University of Rochester. And what do we got? It looks like we got a bunch of questions, so go for
Lots
it.
of questions.
Yeah.
Some you've already answered. So there's a question about Saison. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I've never heard of it. Is Saison okay to use?
That is such an interesting question because I've never used it. I've seen people who have used it, and I would just say it depends what's in it. I would think it would be okay. My guess is that it has a good amount of salt in it, but I'm not sure. So
What is Saison anyway? Is that a brand? Is that a brand name?
Is it a blend of something or?
it's a blend, I think, of some sort of
Okay.
name.
All right. Well,
Okay. June Kingston asks, what are the weight loss properties of turmeric?
Oh, well, I don't really even think of it in that way, but maybe it makes your food taste so bad that you just don't eat it. I don't know. I've not heard about the weight loss properties of turmeric, but I just wouldn't put it on everything. But if you want to lose weight, put it on everything.
Okay.
all right.
Another question is it better to buy organic spices and herbs? And if so, like, are there particular ones that are especially important to buy organic, or does it not matter?
This is a good question. I buy as many of my herbs and spices organic as I can. And the reason I do is because they are highly concentrated. So like cinnamon is the bark of a tree. Do I want to put something in my food that's going to infuse into my food that potentially has issues? So for me, the answer is no. I buy as many organic as I can. You have to decide for yourself. They're usually not that much more expensive. And if you can buy in bulk, you will find they're so much less expensive than buying in a jar. So are there any of those ones that are concentrated, the spices as much as the herbs, but anything you're going to eat a lot of, like if you're going to eat basil, dried basil isn't that good, but it does play a role. Some dried spice herbs are much better than others, but I have to say, you can buy even organic spices at Costco. Sadly, they're in very big jars and you might not use all of them, but they're still going to cost less than the little jars. So just really, figure out what do I use the most of and then buy those organic.
Well, there's a question here that I think is interesting. What about sumac? Someone says, I have sumac, but I don't know how to use it.
Oh, well, if you have ground sumac, put it in anything or on anything that would have lemon in it. It is a very unique flavor. It actually, this is funny, it grows in New York and you can harvest the pods and they are good. So yeah, what I recommend with any herb or spice, even though it's kind of odd, just take a little, put it in your hand, lick your finger, stick your finger in there, taste it and go, oh, what does that taste like? What could I imagine that with? Sumac goes on like every vegetable I have that's like a cruciferous vegetable. There's fabulous with cruciferous vegetables. Not so much with carrots, but you could. So really like taste your herbs and spices to really know what they taste like and then just use your imagination. Or here's a big tip. There is a book called the Flavor Bible, and they wrote one called the Vegetarian Flavor Bible. And it kind of gives you an idea of what goes with what, because people often get confused about what do I do with this thing. And that's why people don't use more herbs and spices, is because they're like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what to do with it. So good question.
Hmm. What do we got, Susan?
Yeah, question from Jenny. Can you or should you grind cinnamon from sticks instead of buying it ground?
That is a really good question. It's funny, I've been looking at my cassia sticks, which tend to fall apart when I cook them in my steel cut oats. And I was like, oh, could I put those in my spice grinder? Here's the reality of cinnamon. It tends to be very, very tough. And even after it's cooked in my steel cut oats, it does not, I can't imagine grinding it. Now I have bought cinnamon chips and I have been able to grind those a bit, but more likely I'm going to ruin my grinder than I am going to be able to get ground cinnamon. So get high quality ground cinnamon. If you're wondering what to do with your sticks, they are fabulous to put into steel cut oats. They're good to put into stews and soups if you want that flavor. Which the Moroccan stews tend to have some of those sweeter flavors in them, like cinnamon and cloves and so on. But if you're want to do it because you're like, what do I do with those sticks? Just find places to put them.
This is interesting. Is there a spice you would not recommend toasting?
Let me think about this. I mean, some of them are better, I'm trying to think. I don't think there's one that I wouldn't recommend toasting, but I have toasted everything from peppercorns to coriander to cardamom. I've toasted all of those. Some you're going to get a lot more flavor out of than others, but I like to toast cumin, mustard seeds, sesame seeds, and the cardamom, not so much, it's kind of mild. So you kind of have to experiment and see, but, some of them are more gentle than
others. There's a really interesting question from Kristen who says, I buy a delicious but expensive olive mixture at Wegmans in Rochester called Olives Jubilee. And it has several types of olives in it, has a bit of oil, and then for the ingredient list, it just says spices.
Oh.
And due to the expense, they'd like to make it on their own. And what spices would you recommend for that?
Well, having never tasted it and being very far from Wegmans, I can't really tell you, but my guess is it's probably something like a pickling spice, which would maybe have coriander, maybe possibly cloves, maybe mustard seeds. So look up a pickling spice. It may have bay leaves in it. There's one that I'm thinking of. Oh, here's one. Maybe allspice, which is, I didn't mention it, but I have fallen in love with allspice, the berries, and I grind those. They have a very unique flavor. So you'd have to kind of look at, they're not going to tell you what's in there, but because they just have to say spices. But if you actually look at the liquid, you may be able to see what's in there and kind of estimate like what is it. But look at a pickling spice online and then maybe add those to it.
Interesting.
Sounds good.
What's a good spice or herb blend to add to steamed carrots, broccoli, and cauliflower?
Are they all together?
It sounds like it. Carrots, broccoli, and cauliflower together.
Cauliflower.
It's together.
Well, I mean, you could add, it depends what you like. This is the whole thing. Like, I'm not a big fennel fan, but fennel is a great, as the seed is really wonderful. It's so good for digestion. But I don't like it, so I don't use it often. You could use something, I really like dill with carrots, but I may not like it so much with the cauliflower and the broccoli. So I would probably make an herb blend, maybe with some basil, oregano. You can go in many directions. You can go Italian and do thyme, oregano, basil, and do that, or you could go in another direction and try and figure out, you know, what you like. But I don't do my carrots usually with those other two vegetables, so it's kind of stumping me.
Interesting. Dr. Friedman, what's next?
So I'm interpreting this question. When you're using an Instapot, how do you figure out when to add the spices? Do you add them early? Do you add them late?
Well, basically you follow my recipes and it will tell you, but if you don't know so here's how, so spices that are hot will get hotter in the Instant Pot. So anything with a chili in it will get hotter. So you add it later. Any dried herb, like, you know, let's say it's oregano, you can add it at the beginning when you cook, and then you can add it again at the end. Anything that is fresh, like let's say you had fresh oregano, add that at the end. So you have a way to kind of gauge what you can do. With the spices, use my recipes. When you cook in the Instant Pot, you need to use more spices than you do on the stovetop. So if it's a specific thing, I could answer, but in general, more spices than you would normally use, except for the hot things.
Great, thank you.
How do you recommend cleaning the grinder between spices?
Oh, thank you. That is perfect. I didn't mention that. I clean my grinder. The thing about these grinders is you can't really put water in them. I clean my grinder either with white bread, which I never have, or white rice, which I keep around specifically for cleaning my grinder. It takes the oils out of the grinder and allows you to use it for the next thing so that your cardamom doesn't taste like garlic or whatever it is that you're doing.
Amazing. Wow, well, thank you. So it is now 8:30, and Professor Nussinow, we are so grateful for your time. We really enjoyed this, and from the comments, I can tell that our audience really enjoyed it too. We had a lot of questions which we never got to, and there's lots of comments in the chat which we also haven't gotten to, but we will download the chat. And this a recording of this will become available in a week or so, and anybody who's registered for this will receive a link to the recording, which will be placed on the Pale Blue Dot community. So once again, thank you so much, Jill. Thank you,
Oh.
Dr. Friedman. It was really great. And thank you, Bob, who's our engineer in the background. And thank you to our audience from all over the country. It was great to see you all.
Thank you for having me. And if anyone has a burning question, you can always email me and I probably will answer you.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.